All right, today we are cracking open a cold case that's been unsolved for 500 years. And trust me, it's got everything you'd want in a modern crime thriller. We're talking a charismatic leader, a whole bunch of powerful enemies, a locked room mystery, and a conspiracy that might still be alive today. The big question is, who exactly was Chaitanya Dev, and why is his death still such a dangerous secret?
When you look into what happened to the 16th century spiritual icon, Chaitanya Dev, you basically get three completely different stories. Was he murdered in some kind of sinister plot? Did he, just mystically vanish into the divine? Or was it something much more mundane, just a tragic accident? As we're about to find out, the answer, well, it's dangerously hard to pin down.
And when I say dangerous, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, get this, in our own time, a scholar named Dr. Jaydev Mukhopadhyay, who dedicated his life to solving this exact mystery, was himself murdered. And his case, also unsolved. So this isn't just some dusty old history story. The silence around this case, it has echoes that you can still hear today.
Okay, so to really get why his disappearance is still such a big deal, we have to understand the man himself. Who was Chaitanya Dev? And how did his fate become one of history's biggest secrets?
You can really think of his life in two totally different parts. In the first act, he was known as Nimai, this brilliant, maybe even a little arrogant scholar. But then he goes on a pilgrimage, and something just clicks. He has this massive spiritual transformation and becomes Chaitanya, a mystic who's just full of ecstatic devotion and renounces, the whole material world. For the next 24 years, he's traveling all over India, spreading his message. He eventually settles down in Puri, and that's where, at just 48 years old, he just vanishes.
Now you gotta understand, Chaitanya wasn't just another holy man. He was a flat-out revolutionary. He popularized the Hare Krishna mantra and this idea of Bhakti, or pure devotion, making spirituality something everyone could access. I mean, he completely ignored the rigid caste system, welcoming people from the lowest rungs of society. This, of course, got him a huge following. But for every devoted follower he gained, he made a powerful new enemy who saw his whole movement as a massive threat to the way things were.
So, let's start with the official stories, shall we? The explanations that have been passed down for centuries. The ones that conveniently avoid any mention of foul play.
Okay, so the simplest theory, the most straightforward one, comes from a poet named Jagannath. He wrote that during one of his ecstatic dances at a festival, Chaitanya cut his foot on a brick. Simple enough, right? But the wound got infected. We're talking tetanus or septicemia, and a few days later he died. It's a simple, believable, and totally non-controversial explanation.
But of course, the mystical stories are the ones that really took off. The most famous one claims he just walked into the inner sanctum of the Jagannath temple and literally merged with the stone statue of the god. Another one says that in a divine trance, he walked right into the Bay of Bengal and poof, never came back. There's even a weird twist on that one where a fisherman later catches his body in a net and revives him by chanting. See what's happening here? All these conflicting supernatural tales do one thing really well: they explain a disappearance without needing a body.
But for a lot of historians, these mystical stories, they don't sound much like divine miracles. They sound like a cover-up. A cover-up for something much, much darker. And that brings us to the most sinister theory of all: murder.
So if it was murder, who had a motive? Well, it turns out, pretty much everyone with any power. The temple priests? They were jealous. The crowds were coming to see him, not their deity. Political advisors? They were terrified that the king, who was one of Chaitanya's biggest followers, was totally neglecting his duties. Some people were even spreading rumors that he was a spy for the Muslim sultan. And of course, the entire Orthodox establishment hated him for shaking up the caste system. The man was literally surrounded by enemies.
And this all leads us to the day he disappeared. The historian Dinesh Chandra Sen asks what is probably the most chilling question in this whole affair. We know Chaitanya was last seen going into the Jagannath temple around 3 p.m. The doors were then bolted from the inside, and they didn't open again until 8 p.m. That's 5 hours of total silence. So, what in the world happened in that room?
Right. So when those doors finally open, the priests just announced that Chaitanya had merged with the divine. He was gone. End of story. No other explanation. But that explanation left this huge, gaping hole in the narrative that's bothered researchers for centuries. If he just ascended to heaven, where's the body?
For almost 500 years, that question just hung in the air. There was no physical evidence, just rumors and legends. That is, until the year 2000. Maybe.
But first, listen to this. The famous historian Niharanjan Ray, he wrote in a private letter that he was convinced Chaitanya was murdered as part of a huge conspiracy. But then he added something that'll send a chill down your spine. He said, "I cannot say who because I wish to live a little longer." The fear surrounding this theory was and is very, very real.
6.5 feet. Just burn that number into your brain. It might just be the single most important clue in this entire mystery.
Why? Because that is the approximate height of a human skeleton that archaeologists reportedly found during renovations. And it wasn't in a grave. It was sealed inside a wall of the Jagannath temple, the very same temple where Chaitanya was last seen alive.
The connection here is just impossible to ignore. Historical accounts consistently describe Chaitanya as being exceptionally tall for his time. This skeleton, also exceptionally tall. Chaitanya vanished inside the Jagannath temple. The skeleton was found hidden inside the walls of that exact temple. The correlation is just, it's startling.
For just a second there, it must have felt like the whole case was about to be blown wide open. Could this finally be it? The body they swore didn't exist? The actual smoking gun proving the murder conspiracy was real all along? But this is where the story takes yet another dark twist. Because the discovery that should have solved everything, it only made the mystery even deeper.
Instead of kicking off a huge investigation, a wall of silence just went up. The discovery was immediately suppressed. Reports say major newspapers refused to touch the story. And then, the skeleton itself, the one piece of potential evidence that could solve everything, it just vanished from the public record, never to be seen or officially talked about again.
So, why is this case still ice cold after all this time? Well, for one, his own biographers, the people who wrote down every other detail of his life, they went completely silent when it came to his death. Strange, right? Then you have all those conflicting mystical legends that were clearly pushed to muddy the waters. And as we've seen, researchers who got a little too close were met with fear or worse. The trail has been deliberately cold for 500 years.
You know that historian, Niharanjan Ray? The word he used for what happened was gumkhun. It's a Bengali term, and it doesn't just mean murder. It means a very specific type of murder, a forced disappearance, where the body is hidden so thoroughly that you can deny the crime ever even happened. It's a perfect description for what so many people believe happened behind those bolted temple doors.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty haunting question. Chaitanya's followers truly believe he became one with God, but many historians suspect he was the victim of a brutal, cold-blooded conspiracy. With the historical facts silenced and the physical evidence buried, we might never actually know for sure. And it really makes you wonder, when the truth is gone, does the most convenient story just win?